welcome you all to this cross-party group on towns today. I'm delighted to welcome so many people, although I'm unable to see, but I dare say we'll see during the meeting just how many people have actually joined us today. But we're very grateful to all of you who have for taking the time in these particularly difficult circumstances. My own observation is that the cross-party group in towns, this is maybe a good moment for it, because it seems to me that probably towns are faring better than cities at the moment. However, we will hear from three very distinguished speakers later in the programme and in the agenda. But it would be remiss of me before we start properly to do anything other than thank my deputy convener, Gillian Martin, who has been an enormous help and has chaired, I think, 3 meetings in my absence due to my illness. So I would very much like to thank her. And I would also like to thank Phil and Elaine and Alison and Ewan for their support to me during this extraordinarily difficult time. But I think we should now move on, and if my opening remarks have not been 5 minutes, well, then that will allow more time for other parts of the business to go ahead. So firstly, now I would like to deal with the minutes of the meeting of the cross-party group held on the 4th of March. And the minutes of that meeting have been in your hands for some time. And I would just like to firstly seek approval of those minutes. The way I think we're going to do this is if anyone dissents from the minutes, perhaps they could unmute themselves and let me know. And I will come to matters arising from the minutes, but in the first instance, I would just like to seek everybody's approval. So unless I hear anything from anybody, I will assume that these minutes are approved. I'll give you a few seconds. And in the absence of dissent, I will take that as approval of those minutes of the cross-party group held on the 4th of March. Are there any matters arising from that meeting on the 4th of March? And there being none, apparently, we'll move swiftly on. And the next item of business is the AGM, which were also minutes of the AGM, which was last held on the 4th of September 2019, the last AGM. Again, I think these minutes have possibly been approved, but just I would formally seek approval again of those minutes, if I may. And unless there is any dissent from those minutes of the AGM on the 4th of September 2019, I'll take them as read and approved. There being no one having come onto my screen at any rate, thank you for approving the minutes of the last AGM. Are there any matters arising from the last AGM that anyone would wish to bring up? And again, there being none, I'll take those minutes as both approved and there being no matters arising. I now want to move on to the election of office bearers, and at this point I'll hand over to Alison Jones, which will be a surprise to her, and seek nominations for the position of chairman for this position.
We are now looking for an MSP to propose John Scott MSP as convener of the CPG.
Hi, I'd like to propose John Scott as the chair.
Do you accept, John?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll move on to deputy conveners. Can I seek a proposal for Gillian Martin, MSP, and Neil Bibby, MSP, to be co-deputy conveners.
I would like very much to propose Gillian Martin as the deputy convener. She has been an exemplary deputy convener thus far, and I would be delighted to propose her again, if I may.
And are you happy to accept?
I'm also happy.
I can propose Neil Bibby.
And I would second that. And are there any other proposals? And there being none, then it would appear, however awkwardly this may seem to have been done, it would appear that I have been elected as the convener of the cross-party group in towns here at the Scottish Parliament for another year, and I very much welcome back my deputy conveners, Gillian Martin and Neil Bibby, to help me in this task for another year. Indeed, it won't be another year, it will be until the dissolution of Parliament, which will take place probably around the end of March. So we have the work in hand for today. I think that concludes it doesn't conclude the AGM. We are preparing a report which will go to the Standards Committee, and that report will cover our activity undertaken as a cross-party group. Most of you will be aware of the work that we've done. We will essentially summarise that. Some of the topics we've covered at meetings are towns for leisure, towns vacant spaces made good, and of course you all know that meetings scheduled during the COVID pandemic were postponed, and also a meeting in December 2019 was postponed due to the general election taking place. So we've also had to, as you're probably aware, postpone the parliamentary reception in May 2020 due to the restrictions. But of particular note is the Scotland's Towns Partnership campaign launched in the summer of 2020, which got a lot of local and particularly national coverage, and the MSP Connector programme has been incorporated into the Scotland Loves Local campaign, and all are encouraged to visit www.lovelocal.scot. So forward plans will be shared and will be available online in due course. So I think we will now, unless anybody wants to tell me differently, I will now move on to the next item of business, and I would just like to introduce Phil Prentice, who is the Chief Officer, as you all know, of Scotland's Towns Partnership. And Phil will talk about current initiatives to support the economic recovery of town centres and high streets, including the Scotland Loves Local public relations campaign. And so over to you, Phil. Alison, if you can facilitate that, please.
Fantastic, John. Thanks very much. And I have to say, on behalf of everybody, it's fantastic to have you back again, looking so well. So good afternoon, everybody. I think it's time we now start focusing on recovery, albeit tentative. We are seeing some signs of economic recovery, and we have to just start plotting out a direction in terms of making sure that we can consolidate some of the good behaviours that have emerged from the pandemic. It's been a tough 6 months. No doubt we'll still see some challenges ahead, but I think if we just continue to collaborate and work together, no doubt there will be some brighter days not that far ahead of us. This pandemic landed very swiftly, caught us all by surprise. So end of March, total lockdown. And one of the areas obviously most impacted was the economy. And within all that, our town and city centres. The Scottish Government, to their credit, entered into early dialogue and came up with a response extremely quickly. So at the end of March, literally within a matter of days, we had come up with the BIDS Resilience Fund. So an immediate £1 million injection, which supported 40 projects across the country. And the rationale behind that was that we need hyper-local solutions. We need local collaboratives with development trusts and business groups and town centre partnerships and business improvement districts all working together initially to try and navigate through a very complex set of circumstances, but fundamentally to look at solutions to support the vulnerable within their communities. And the people with that knowledge were particularly business improvement districts led by local business people who had a good knowledge of what was happening on the ground. So we challenged the bids. We said, look, guys, it's time to step up to the plate. It's time to show your worth. And I have to say, virtually every bid across the country has completely performed an exemplar role. They have been fantastic. And we're going to hear from some of the best examples following my brief talk today. Again, we looked at the next phase of support. So initial interventions were around navigating through the government schemes, jobs retention, the VAT and tax deferrals, the small business grants, etc. So those were very, very complex and were obviously coming out from both UK and Scottish government at a speed. So the idea was for the bids to act as the voice of the local business community to make sure that businesses were receiving the best advice possible to help them through very, very difficult times and to make sure that we could salvage as much economic activity as possible. So they've done a very good job. As we started to progress and see some relaxation of the lockdown restrictions, we then moved into what was called the Towns and Bids Resilience and Recovery Fund. We ended up supporting 188 projects across Scotland, and again, it was a further investment of £1 million. And the typical things that we were seeing happening were digital high streets, creation of virtual marketplaces. We were seeing lots of PPE equipment being brought into town centres and city centres, again, social distancing markers, and being able to sort of remind the citizen population that, you know, our town centres, our businesses are doing their utmost to try and make the shopping experience safe. You know, you have to come back in now and try and help support economic recovery. We'll be looking after you, and we've done a lot of investment to make that area safe. Moving on through the summer, we decided that as things had changed and we started to get some better handle of what was happening, obviously there was a reduction in commuting. People were very much captive in their hometowns. So we wanted to reconnect them with their hometowns. And that wasn't just about economic recovery, it was also about net zero, reducing carbon footprint, reduction in commuting patterns, connection again with green space to help with the mental health and well-being, because people were very stressed, working from home, maybe not used to that, lack of social contact, not used to that. So, you know, connecting with local heritage, local green space, but also connecting with the local high street, which in turn also built in more resilience to food security, to local supply chains, as well as employment, etc. So the Scotland Loves Local campaign has been running on a range of platforms since the summertime. We're due to launch into phase 2, but phase 1 was really a message about our towns have always been there for you. You now need to support your town. You are spending much more time at home. You're working in an agile mode. When you get the opportunity, try to dander down or cycle down or drive down into your high street and engage with the local economy. And you might find things that you'd forgotten about, but what you're buying is better provenance and you're supporting employment. So that campaign has been very, very successful. We've got national TV adverts through STV and Borders TV. I'm sure many of you have seen it. They're in primetime slots around Coronation Street and the evening news, etc. And the feedback we've had from that's been phenomenal. Roughly 2.8 million of the population have seen this advert, so it has been very impactful. We also took out a package of press across the country. So we're working with NewsQuest as a key partner, but also smaller partnerships with DC Thomson Press and Journal to make sure we had national coverage. Again, just reinforcing that message of community wealth, of localism, of net zero, of just, we're all in this together, guys, come on, help each other out. And again, the print, the impact of the print media has been fantastic. Again, that also brings in the digital platform. So all of the digital content has been able to recycle, and again, localities have been able to brand it in their own way. So the whole idea here is to think beyond bricks and mortar. Moving into phase 2 of the campaign, which I'll be picking up later with STV today, it's really going to tell the story of why we actually are trying to get people to behave this way. It's trying to tell people that your town centres and the shops within the town centres and city centres, they're not just bricks and mortar. It's a story about people. This is the glue that holds our society together. It keeps our economy alive. And Scotland's just got such a proud history as a nation, a story to tell. Every town has got an invention that went on to impact globally. So now we've got a chance just to actually take some positives from all of this. So the next phase of the campaign will actually show the local farmer taking on an extra delivery guy who's bringing milk and eggs and butter down to the local grocer store. The local grocer store is able to retain the trainee in the shop. He goes out next door and gets his haircut. The trainee modern apprentice hairdresser then meets up with the young guy, and they go and buy a gift for the mum, and then they go across for a cup of coffee. All of that means that the pound has flipped 6 times in the local economy. The pound on Amazon just disappears into the ether. And if we are able to maintain this sort of behavioural shift, we will see a faster and stronger and more resilient Scottish recovery, and hopefully UK recovery as well. So that's the basis of the campaign. Next up, we have the second round of bids funding. So coming very quickly, we will be, I believe it's next Monday, we'll be opening applications to a further round of support for business improvement districts, and we would expect to support a similar number of projects. And then following that, moving into the autumn, there will be the Scotland Loves Local Fund. So again, within Programme for Government, there's a commitment to maintain this momentum, to build upon it, and there will be more money available for towns and city centres as we move towards the autumn. Cities have struggled, and I think we need to bear that in mind, that with lack of commuting and the growth in localism, the towns have actually benefited from that, as John quite rightly pointed out. But there are some behaviours here that I think we need to consolidate. We need to come up with more innovative and different solutions for the cities, but the towns now have got a fantastic opportunity. So in terms of Programme for Government, another key message is that the government has seen the importance of our towns and cities in terms of our social, economic and environmental fabric. So there's a much larger commitment in terms of funding over the next 5 years. Within the initial Programme for Government, we're seeing a £275 million commitment, and that's a substantial uplift. But in terms of, I'm just going to summarise now, because I think it's more interesting if you hear from the people on the ground who have been doing these things. But in summary, what we're trying to promote is, you live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world. So if you've got the opportunity, stay in Scotland and stay Kate over autumn and winter. Shop locally where you can, and where you can, buy Scottish or buy UK, because that will help us build back better, faster and more resiliently. Everybody has tried to help through the campaign. They've all been looking for ways and means to help their local communities. It's been difficult because you've been told to stay at home, but here's a very, very simple message. The easiest and most simplest and most impactful way that you can help Scotland now is to spend your pound in the local economy, because that will allow us to build back better. Okay, listen, I really appreciate your time. And now we're going to hand over to Danielle McCrory-Smith, who has been leading from the front in Stirling City and has done an exemplary job in terms of trying to breathe life back into the historic city of Stirling by leading the Business Improvement District. So over to you, Danielle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Hi, everybody. I will quickly jump onto share screen and hopefully this works. There we go. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Just following on from Phil's words, and take you through as briefly as I possibly can what we've been doing at Stirling to market and support our city. So we have, this is an infographic. A lot of the marketing and branding has been very important to us throughout the pandemic. We're trying to ensure that everyone is aware exactly what it is we are doing as a bid and how we can support our businesses throughout the pandemic. So frequently we are updating this infographic to add on the different projects or initiatives that we are working on. We started off at the very start of the pandemic around March time by all coming together in a local partnership. with the brand Invest in Stirling. So we decided, all the partners, you can see the logos there, we decided the best way to support the city immediately would be, and to safeguard our businesses, would be to, you know, have one source of information that allowed us to speak to as many people and as many businesses or concerned individuals as possible through one website. We had a support email and hotlines set up. E-commerce and job portals were set up very quickly, and all the guidelines and whatnot, as they are currently changing. We are trying to inform as many businesses in Stirling as possible to use that as a central source of information. Thanks to our business resilience grant, we were able to very quickly put into place the Go Forth online training portal. This allowed us to deliver at the time and throughout, we're just at the end of that first 6 months, 2 training courses per month to all businesses in Stirling, irrespective of if they were within the bid levy zone and the bid district. We made those courses available to all businesses. The headline on that was that training was allowed while on furlough. A lot of the courses were CPD accredited or are CPD accredited and mandatory to businesses. So it was a very tangible way that we could deliver business support and can continue to do so. And you can just see there, kind of screen grab, that I can go in and log on to any business in Stirling that has made use of the platform so far and see how they're getting on, what courses they've taken advantage of, and that will allow us to shape how we go forward with that means of business support. And then on the right hand side of that slide, you can see our enrolment each month has been increasing. And that's how many individuals we have enrolled onto our training platform of each month for those courses. On from that, it was something very important to us to be promoting our businesses, of course, the key agenda of any bid throughout lockdown. I'm sure any bid manager or anyone responsible and aware of what's going on in the towns and cities would each say that how our businesses responded to lockdown, to changing their offering. You know, they were very, very quick to, you know, and very agile. So what we did was, through our social media and our web presence, was to share as many of those businesses as we possibly could on a daily basis, with whether they have changed their opening times or what the services they were actually providing. And then that's just an example there in how we try to keep our branding as simple as possible and very coherent throughout. See if we can move on to the next slide. And also, we were able to, thanks to our business resilience grant, promote and support our businesses online with the development of our online business directory. Well, you can see there, that's a screen grab of the Go Forth actual website. This time allowed us to, it was a project we were looking to work on for quite some time, but the downtime of COVID also allowed us to get that organised and in place, and be able to have a listing of all the businesses within our district. You might say, you know, there's social media for all these kind of things, but one of the most important things that I've learned throughout this time was about Google backlinks, and the quantity and quality and relevance of backlinks for a web page. That's how Google Analytics figure out, you know, how a business is listed or searched for in their SEO. So for us to have our directory, you know, physically, there's another means of promoting the businesses, but also linking to their sites, to their social media, and in as many ways as possible, can actually really support those businesses and their online presence. And what we are working on right now, launched in August, was the Go Forth e-commerce grant scheme. That is designed to help businesses trade online, develop their existing online activity, and we are offering match-funded grants from Go Forth direct to the businesses in our district that need to invest in their online presence. And we're very focused that we need to have a virtual city. Obviously, we are doing everything we can to promote footfall on natural physical high streets, but also the businesses in Stirling. I think the latest figure was 71% of businesses in Stirling had or have an online presence, and we hope to increase that significantly. Also, 2020, in the next month, possibly 2 months, Wi-Fi will be available free for all in Stirling city centre. Another kind of important thing about the e-commerce scheme, grant scheme that we have launched, is that, you know, it's not just for improving upon websites or creating websites. We've found a lot of businesses apply specifically looking to introduce a booking system for restaurants that they might not already have that, to facilitate with track and trace, etc. So it direct response to the pandemic, creating a virtual city for Stirling, and we think that these grants hopefully can go quite far. So on to the reopening phase. So back in June, July, as businesses began to reopen, like many bids around the country, we very quickly tried to deliver as much PPE items, as many PPE items as we possibly could. And those were in the form of floor stickers and sneeze guards. And initially we were looking at, you know, the more fixed acrylic, robust, partition for our retail units, etc. But the cost of those were huge. So we were able to introduce these items with the Keeping Stirling Safe message and the Go Forth branding. And we have distributed, I believe the new figure is around 1,500 of those items. And the design of them changed as the guidelines changed as well. We were initially 2 meters apart, and now they just display the message, keep us safe distance. And what we were able to do to market those, and the branding that we put in place with those immediate PPE items that were delivered around town, our larger businesses that we work with, such as the Thistle Centre, they were encouraged and very supportive of using the branding that we had already put in place. So you can see the images there of the main shopping centre of Stirling, using a very similar branding and design to what we've got throughout the town in the independent shops and whatnot. So it's very coherent. Stirling's very easy to understand. That colour scheme is throughout. I think that's very important for the Keeping Stirling Safe message. And just another example, in our preparing for recovery phase, various risk assessments, records, documentation, we were able to provide templates for them, for all the businesses and for the different sectors, to help them, whether it be signage for outside their premises or inside, or staff information, keeping the Go Forth brand coherent throughout all of that. We felt as well delivers a lot of support to the businesses. That's very it's understood straight away that they can come to us for any kind of measure of support, especially in light of the pandemic. Simple hospitality checklist guidelines were introduced, among many other. This is just an example. I'm not sure if everyone else can see those lines on the screen, or if it's just me, but I have no idea what's going on there. On the 14th of August, when hospitality guidelines changed and stricter guidelines came into place, we very quickly were able to deliver a really simple checklist to the businesses, again with the Go Forth branding, to try and make it as simple as possible for them to comprehend and understand the vast amount of guidelines and things that were imposed upon them. And we're constantly changing those kind of documents and messaging that's going out. And in the very early stages as well, that was the June-July phase, we were spreading the message that Stirling is open, shop local and keep Stirling thriving. What I personally found, that as I was making my way around the high street, it wasn't clear which businesses had reopened. So we put in place these very colourful posters, the rainbow, obviously, a nod to the NHS and our support there. And that also then follows on, well, the Scotland Loves Local works hand in hand with that initiative that we put into place. And we can still go drive around the town now and see the businesses, drawing attention to themselves with such a bright and colourful poster. And we've done a few campaigns in local publications, such as the example there, picking out some of the local businesses that have reopened, and also found it really important throughout this time to keep introducing myself and Yitka, the team at Go Forth, so that all the businesses in the area, far and wide, know that there is, an identity there, someone that they can talk to at any point, and know exactly who to come and speak to if they need anything. And that is how Go Forth has been supporting the Scotland Loves Local campaign, and some of our retailers are just images behind. This is just more an example of, we've found it really important just now, not just for the businesses in publications to share far and wide. This is the Stirling Loves Local magazine that is circulated to 35,000 addresses in the area. So we've taken this opportunity to share with them exactly what it is Stirling does, and that they have something as a bid, introducing what a bid is to them, and hopefully welcoming any prospective businesses or individuals that might want to start a business but are very concerned about what kind of support they may have. I think introducing them to what bids are and what Go Forth can do for them hopefully will encourage them to make that leap. Stirling has a number of virtual events. We are continuing to support. Bloody Scotland is currently running. In terms of events, like any other bid across the city or local authority, we're really struggling with the typical events calendar that we'd have. So a lot of them have gone virtual and online, and we've been able to support that. So to finish up, what's next for Stirling? We are working on just now a campaign named Independent Stirling. That will follow on from the Scotland Loves Local campaign and the initial We're Open for the reopening phase, poster campaign that we did. And we're looking to create an online interactive map trail of independent retailers. We are very much of the opinion that even the nationals will not survive in our high streets unless we support the independents and the unique reasons why customers and consumers should visit Stirling or the local towns. So we are pushing forward with Independent Stirling. The stickers will, once that's all in place, the stickers will be displayed on the door or the shop front of any independent retailers throughout the city. And then you'll be able to go and support them immediately, seeing that sticker and see online an interactive map trail to allow footfall to follow that.
That's you getting finished up.
Yeah, no problem. Last slide. And then finally, we are just working on our project just now on how we can deal with our vacant unit situation, which of course is going to be increasing. So we'll come on to that and hopefully be able to tell everyone a lot more exciting stories about that in the future. Okay.
That's absolutely brilliant, Danielle. Thank you so very much. Your enthusiasm and your expertise comes across in your presentation, which has been terrific, and you won't have been able to watch the chat box while you've been speaking, but the comments that you're receiving are immensely positive.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
So we'll come to questions eventually, but before we do, I want to introduce Caroline Warburton, who's the Regional Leadership Director East of Visit Scotland and covering from Fife up to the Murray Coast. And her role is to ensure that Visit Scotland activities contribute to strengthening the region's visitors' economy. As we're pushing on for time, there's a huge amount more here to say about Caroline, but I'll let her speak for herself if she will, and hand over to you now, Caroline, to give us your presentation, please. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, John. And I will, mindful of time, I will canter straight into my presentation. I haven't got slides, so I'm afraid you will have to look at me for the next few minutes. Really, what I wanted to do today was to just kind of reinforce that link between towns and tourism. We are undoubtedly in very strange times, and I guess I'm here to not only represent Visit Scotland, but also hopefully the wider tourism sector that is struggling at this time. Visit Scotland, as most of you I'm sure will know, is the National Tourism National Tourism Organisation, and we work very closely with Scotland's Towns Partnership and are supporting the Scotland Loves Local campaign through our own activity at the moment. And we're currently looking, as we move into autumn and winter, what that marketing relationship might be as the Scotland Loves Local campaign moves into phases 2 and 3. So I guess towns and tourism, there is an inextricable link between the two. Towns are such an important part of the visitor experience. They provide many of the unique and authentic experiences that we know that visitors are increasingly looking for. And that might be through food and drink, it might be through attractions, it might be through accommodation, or through live music and the arts. I think there are probably very few towns in Scotland that do not have hospitality businesses within them. And as a result, from a tourism sector, they've all been affected by the last few months. For many towns across Scotland, tourism is not only an integral part of their economy, but it's also an integral part of their community as well. And tourism can help sustain many of the communities, or does help sustain many of the communities. Some of this is through direct spending, so visitors actually putting money into the economy directly, and this can help a number of businesses stay open during the quieter months to support the local communities, but also in providing jobs and livelihoods so that people can live and work in these often more rural towns and help to support the wider community there. But also tourism supports the wider community, the wider supply chain, what we call the visitor economy. So that's supporting the other trades such as plumbers, electricians, marketing consultants, accountants. So it really is right at the heart of many of our communities in Scotland. Some of Scotland's towns have tourism in their bones. They have grown around the growth in tourism. These might be our spa towns, our coastal towns, Pitlochry, Callander, Oban, for example. Others have been capitalising on new opportunities, and one example is the growth of cruise ships. So the towns of Kirkwall, Invergordon, Inverclyde, for example, and so they're particularly feeling that loss of visitor income coming in at the moment, with the cruise ships pretty much stopped at the moment. And other towns are using tourism as part of their own regeneration, and two very good examples are Falkirk and Dunfermline, both of which are using either their modern heritage in terms of the Kelpies and the Falkirk Wheel and the Helix Park, in terms of Falkirk, and then in terms of Dunfermline, their ancient heritage, to really drive a sense of destination in those towns and to bring people into the communities. So it goes without saying that this year has been a very strange one. And when lockdown was announced, the industry rallied very quickly indeed. The Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group was formed, which brought together the industry through the Scottish Tourism Alliance, who have done an incredible job of representing what is a very disparate industry very, very well indeed. So it brought together the industry, the Scottish Government and the public agencies, including ourselves. A plan was pulled together quickly, which is available on visitscotland.org if anybody would like to look at it. And this focused on 4 key areas. So it was respond, reset, restart and recover. So responding to the immediate challenge, the focus was very much about supporting industry and helping them to adapt. And then as life settled into lockdown, business support continued. But we were tracking the feelings of both businesses and of consumers in readiness for reopening. And we began to look outwards to remind visitors that were hoping to come to Scotland but couldn't, to dream now and travel later. We wanted to keep Scotland at the front of people's minds. At Visit Scotland, we also recognised that many of the industry and destination associations who were playing such an important role at this stage, such as the bids, were in a pretty precarious situation financially. So in May, we launched our Destination and Sector Support Fund, and 81 applications were approved with a funding of about £500,000. A number of these were local tourism groups or town groups and business improvement districts. So as Restart got nearer, we were looking at the preparations for reopening, and this involved supporting both businesses, towns and destinations to get ready. Scottish Government launched guidelines for the sector, and we worked with the government and the sector groups to ensure that the guidelines were relevant for the various different groups within the tourism industry. But also it became clear that it was not only businesses who were having to adapt to these changes, but communities were having to adapt too. And for some, the prospect of people arriving from outside the town boundaries was concerning for them. And so the question was, how can we create the balance between reopening our town economies whilst keeping local residents safe at the same time? And there are some wonderful examples of community groups working together with industry groups to establish their own codes of conduct. And you'll hear from Debbie McCallum from Tourism St Andrews in a few minutes to give a really excellent example of the work that they've been doing in St Andrews. At a national level, we published a visitor charter, which encouraged visitors to support the tourism industry, to plan ahead, and also to be considerate to the local communities in which they were staying. Insights from visitors were telling us that they were still looking for assurance that businesses were adhering to guidelines. They wanted to feel safe. So Visit Scotland launched the We're Good to Go scheme. This is a free online self-certification scheme for tourism and hospitality businesses. And to date, over 6,500 businesses in Scotland have signed up to this, and it is a mark that they have been through the necessary risk assessments. So with everyone working to reassure communities, to reassure businesses, and to reassure visitors, we now needed to let people know that Scotland was looking to reopen. It was clear that the first visitors were going to be local, so it was important that we at Visit Scotland worked hard to get the messaging right. We wanted to encourage people not only to continue to explore their local areas, but also to spend their holidays exploring other parts of Scotland and perhaps areas that they hadn't been to before. Scotland needed them. So we launched our marketing with the line, "Only in Scotland can travelling so little make such a big difference." Throughout all of these activities, we have been mindful of the principles of responsible tourism, the need for everybody to take responsibility for their own actions. And in our own marketing, we've been mindful not to promote those parts of the country which are unable to cope with a lot of visitors or which are already receiving plenty, recognising that some places are not yet open or that they have limited capacity. It has been very much about listening to each other and working together. Businesses have undoubtedly had to adapt quickly, as well as the cost of introducing and enforcing social distancing measures. They've also had to train their staff in new procedures and adopt new online systems such as online booking and track and trace. But in the main, the tourism industry has reopened. Looking ahead, we know that the path in front of us is not going to be a straight one. There will be undoubted twists and turns on the way. But one thing we do know is that tourism will look different, but it is going to return. So we have an opportunity to support our towns, to think differently and to tell their stories, as Phil said right at the very beginning, to use the visitor economy to benefit locals as well as visitors. And this can be achieved simply by embracing the responsible tourism principle, which is that by creating better places to live, we create better places for people to visit. There is an opportunity to support the move away from town centres being solely about retail and to look to what the experiences that our town centres can start to provide, be this through experience-based shopping or other activities. To do this, we need to get the basics right. So we need to ensure that there is good connectivity, both digital and through transport, access to public services, such as green space, public toilets and clean environment. And if it works for locals, the chances are that it will work for visitors as well. The development of public space, indoor and outdoor, which is accessible to all, can also lead to more events and experiences for communities and therefore for visitors to enjoy. We can use our towns to showcase local arts and crafts, providing spaces for exhibitions, local units for designers and producers, and the installation of public art. Tourism is undoubtedly a people industry. Before lockdown, it employed well over 200,000 people. We know that tourism is going to recover. However, we do not know exactly when this is going to happen, nor do we know what will have permanently changed. I think the same is going to be said for our own towns as well. This is undoubtedly a period of change. The current situation has taught us many things, and one of those, I think, is the interdependency between tourism, towns, and our communities. So working together is the only way forwards. And with that in mind, I will hand over to Debbie from Tourism St Andrews, who is going to provide an excellent example of a town that has really pulled together to welcome visitors back in. Over to you, Debbie.
Hi there, thank you, Caroline. Hello, everybody. I am now going to try and share my screen so you can actually see what we've been up to. Has that worked? Has that worked? Has everybody got my presentation on screen? Thank you. I'm Debbie McCallum. I'm Chair of Tourism St Andrews. Tourism St Andrews is a volunteer local tourism association constituted under the Fife Tourism Partnership. We set up in 2015, and there are a number of us in Fife. We've got approximately 150 members, and we do have a bid in St Andrews. It's very town centre focused, not really tourism. However, we all do work together. I was actually vice chair on the bid steering group, and I'm really hoping that it will carry on. They've been caught in a very difficult year, and without a bid in St Andrews, I'm not quite sure what will happen. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about that. The group's main focus is to inform businesses and encourage engagement and collaboration. We're all volunteers, we all have our own businesses. I have my own property business, so it's very much about the amount of volunteer time people have. Specific projects we have worked on, we have an app, St Andrews Beach Wheelchair Project. We had the Cowper Maquettes for 3 months, which was fantastic, and various other things. As you're probably all aware, St Andrews is absolutely vital and critical to the Fife and Scottish economy, and more so than ever now. COVID-19 in St Andrews, to start with, it was a shock and an awful period of negativity as bookings were cancelled and businesses were closed, which was followed by a period of waiting. It was a really dreadful time for everybody. Quite unusual to sit in the garden for huge amounts of time, but to be cancelling and very negative. And whilst we engaged in, talking to businesses through Zoom, and we pivoted quickly our own business to work with some frontline workers and making sure our tenants had the latest information. As regards to Tourism St Andrews, of course, all our committee members and members of our businesses dealing with a huge plethora of issues, and we tried to help, and we had our own We'll Wait campaign to align with others, and we also supported the COVID response group, CASA, and have raised money mask making for the town, which will be used for projects. However, St Andrews, we knew that once lockdown was lifted, St Andrews would be a very popular visitor destination, more so than normal. And it would be compounded with the university very proactively encouraging a full return of students. It would be a very difficult situation. We have approximately 9,000 students returned to our town literally over the last week, and with a total population of 16,000, of which 25% is over 70. We have a vulnerable population, and the East Nuke, which is next door, is similar, and the message has been very much from the government, and a message which we were incredibly successful at, nobody else can come in, you must stay home. So everybody's staying home, and visitors were being viewed with suspicion and fear. And to have all these extra people now back in our town, we still have this. So we're not a funded group. We applied to the support fund and received some money along with a couple of other local funds. But of course, we'll only fund print and social media. So again, we were reliant on our committee's volunteer time to produce this piece of work that was going to make the locals, the visitors of St Andrews feel that we were doing absolutely everything we could to make them as safe as possible as we reopened. We'd already been in touch with Urban Foresight, who've worked in Dundee. We had been aware for some time that St Andrews needed a plan for the future. Huge amount of pressure on St Andrews from many areas, golf, university, expanding town economy, and it's good problems to have, but we don't have a plan to manage that. So we'd already been talking to this company, and we felt that maybe this is what we should do in order to create some sort of charter. So we felt it was absolutely paramount that St Andrews signed up to the highest standards of safety prescribed by the government as we reopened. Our visitors and locals needed to be confident, and that's really key, that they felt that every business was doing absolutely everything they could, every organisation, to keep people as safe as possible. Social distancing in a medieval town is impossible. So wearing masks would have been mandatory from an early stage if it was up to me. So, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. We created the charter, which our volunteers have delivered to every household and every visitor as they come to town, and it's been supported by a strong social media campaign. Key to this was that over 300 businesses and organisations within the town came together to make the town a safe and secure place to visit, work and live. We hope this commitment would give some confidence to the many we knew would arrive as soon as St Andrews lockdown lifted, as well as our residents, to make it as safe as possible. So the charter came. It was good to have a fresh look at design for St Andrews, because so often you see the silhouette. So the cathedral is in its glory there, but slightly, revamped and very much in keeping with the love heart and the colours. So we wanted to work together to make St Andrews as safe and secure for everyone. Many businesses engaged with the campaign. The Old Course Hotel is here. This is a time when they were just beginning to start to put themselves back together to reopen, and everybody has been very supportive. We managed to work with the university, the Links Trust, the Old Course Hotel, the Fairmont, G1 Group, Morrison's, Fisher & Donaldson. All the major stakeholders within the town signed up to this, to use this collateral to launch their own safety charters adhering to the highest government standards. It was well received. Many of, oh, now I'm getting lines, interesting. Many businesses displayed the charter and the window sticker, used the collateral in the media. We've worked together to do the best we can, and the key to its success was working and asking people to take on the responsibility of their own safety through the charter. It's impossible just to say, oh, the council will do this, the council have no money, they're not going to do this. It is not, it is down to the individual and the organisations to take the responsibility. And our 5C strategy was adhered to wherever possible. As a volunteer group, we felt this was important at a time to the safe return of St Andrews to the new normal. The town is extremely busy. Businesses are working hard to recoup their early year losses. We're very lucky in that respect. However, it comes with this challenge to balance off the community with our visitors, with our students. So this is the charter with lots of squiggles on it. I'm really not sure where they came from. And hopefully you'll be able to have a look at this once this is over. I'm aware of time. But again, it was really saying, these are what we're looking for you to do. You need to take this individual and collective responsibility and deliver the highest standards prescribed by government, ever-changing standards, as we all know. Project development, further funding was not forthcoming. Funding is on a tight string, I know, at the moment. However, our volunteers continue to host a stall at the farmers market and at the university, giving information and free masks to all. We were very lucky to get them donated. The university adopted the charter, and the students that are arriving and have arrived have been involved in the campaign and its distribution. Right now, our local community are giving the town a wide berth as the students have returned, and they have nothing to do, the students, I mean. So this is a whole other issue, but hopefully will be addressed. But again, it's down to them, and all we can do is keep giving this message. It is down to the individual to take the responsibility to keep everybody safe around them. We have a huge volume of visitors from the UK and an international demographic of students and their families arriving. it's challenging times, and we were one of those that Caroline wasn't promoting, because it wasn't about getting more visitors, it was about keeping those that come safe and giving them a good experience. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Brilliant, Debbie. Thank you very much for your presentation, and indeed thank you all for your presentations. And just to give you a moment to think up yet more questions, and we have certainly quite a few. There was a part of the AGM that was missed, and there were over 100 people online still, and I hope there still are. But with your permission, I would just like to formally propose that the Secretariat, in terms of the AGM, should continue as Scotland's Towns Partnership. And I would also like to record my thanks to Phil and Alison and Elaine and Ewan for all their enormous efforts in terms of facilitating this cross-party group and making it the huge success it is. I think it is one of the most successful cross-party groups there is in the Parliament. And again, my thanks to you. So with your permission, and unless I hear something different, I would propose that the Scotland's Town Partnership continue as the Secretariat for this group. There being no dissent, I'll now move on to the questions. And I have a variety of questions. I'm going to start with questions for Phil. And this question is from David Logie, and he would like to know, Phil, has there been any investigation into implementing complementary currencies to help Scotland's small businesses with the current lack of cash flow and excess of capacity? And at the same time, Phil, if you'd like to deal with this question, beyond advertising campaigns, what initiatives are in place to encourage shoppers back onto the high street instead of shopping online? For example, new loyalty programs within the local community. Phil, over to you.
Okay, thanks, John. Briefly, yes, the second phase of Scotland Loves Local, part of that campaign is to actually create a national platform to support local currencies. So STP and Scottish Government's investment will be to come up with a national infrastructure on a white label basis, which basically means all the individual towns, Paisley, Falkirk, Moffat, could actually benefit from that investment and create their own local currency. The beauty of that answers the second part of the question, because that currency would only be redeemable within the local economy. So you couldn't go online to buy something with that currency. It's only going to be redeemed within the local economy. Again, this is just building on Scotland Loves Local. It's building in community wealth. It's building in food security and resilience and local food supply chains, etc. So the Love Local campaign will create a platform to support digital currency. It'll probably be card-based because, albeit there's very little risk in terms of handling cash, it's the human transaction that causes the risk. So we will be trying to use some form of contactless, but we do have partners lined up. We have a detailed proposal, and once that funding comes in the autumn, we should be able to move forward with that.
Okay, thanks very much, Phil. I regret to say I think David Lonsdale has left the meeting, but his question was for Danielle, who David is a local to Stirling, and he wanted to say that the Keep Stirling Safe campaign is very prominent in the city centre, but he would like to know, Danielle, why do you think 29% of local firms have yet to have a web presence, and are there any particular sectors which are laggards? And also, do you have data on the footfall in the city centre? SRC's own data suggests that Scotland-wide shopping malls and city centre footfalls are down by 30 to 40%. Danielle, if you've if you would like to comment on that, that'd be brilliant, please.
Absolutely. So we are advised that in the shopping centres themselves, footfall has been down some 45%. We imagine that will continue through September, when we would typically be expecting a number of more students to return from the city centre. However, that's why we want to shift the focus onto the independents. Of course, the nationals can be accessed online and are very well advertised in that sense. So to encourage the independents can only assist, you know, the larger shops and the nationals being visited in the actual stores on the high streets. I'm just double checking the rest of that. In terms of why 29% of local firms have yet to have a web presence, that might be, you know, we don't have any specific reason for that. We have a number of hospitality businesses that have not required it. A lot of independent, very highly regarded restaurants and whatnot in Stirling haven't had the need to have online booking systems and whatnot. Whereas now, and you know, since reopening, they are still busy. However, online booking systems, you know, we've been encouraging them that they may assist with track and trace and whatnot, and you know, the current guidelines. So we don't know why any particular sector doesn't have an online presence. You know, some are not even very open to it. But we hope to assist if any of those reasons are financial, or even, you know, lack of knowledge or assistance, then that's where we can step in and help and hopefully increase that gap.
Fantastic. Debbie, I've got another question. Danielle, I have another question for you from Debbie McCall of Tourism St Andrews, and she would like to know more about the Stirling Biz online presence. Do you mean social media? And she would be interested in the virtual city concept. If you would like to discuss that just a little, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just offered privately to Debbie a call that might be suitable to discuss, you know, specific projects and whatnot. But yeah, with regarding the Stirling businesses online presence, I'm not sure if the question is with regards to the online directory and the backlinks, or if that's just, you know, about the sharing and how we are approaching social media and sharing, you know, the changing of the businesses. I might need to revert back for that question.
Okay, well, if you're speaking to her, then that will obviously be cleared up in your call. I'm now moving on to a question from Ed Archer, and this is a question for all the panel. It's a short question, and there'll need to be short answers from each of the panel. But what do you all think about each town having a mobile app with details of transport links, car parking, accommodation, toilets, businesses, and heritage information to save people reinventing the wheel? Could it be done to a national standard? Phil, since you're the man quick on your feet, I will ask you to go for it first, please, but briefly.
Yeah, I mean, the concept's great. South Lanarkshire have used their Scottish Government support to do something very similar. So again, looking at the scale of a local authority-wide investment, multiple towns, maybe somewhere in the region of about 40 towns will benefit through the single app. So I think it needs to have a scale to it. You couldn't ask each individual town to sort of come up with that themselves. There would be a cost barrier to that. But where there's a dialogue with local government and other key partners like Visit Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, potentially there could be a white label solution for all of Scotland. Yeah, we don't need to have a proliferation of apps all over the place. If we had a sort of standard white label platform, that would be beneficial.
Okay, briefly, Danielle, would you like to comment on that? And then we'll go to Caroline and Debbie.
Yes, I think where possible, if there could be a standardised app, you know, we would definitely welcome that. There's already within, you know, Stirling a number of different apps for track and trace, ordering, delivery, whatnot, and I can't imagine everyone will have the amount of, you know, memory on their devices that's required to hold all these things. So, you know, Stirling does have an Explore Stirling app. That's constantly, you know, being updated. We've got plans for that in the next year. However, if there was to be something, you know, Scotland wide, if the bids could facilitate, being the route for that would be fantastic.
It would seem to me it would make sense if an app sort of automatically switched on when you were in your area, as decided by your phone, and the app for that area could perhaps come into play. But then that's a bit technical. Caroline, would you like to briefly comment on that as well?
I suppose my question would be, what is the app for? And I think that's the bit that we need to be very clear about. If the app is aimed at local people, then it may be that it is easier and simpler for local towns or local areas to develop their own app. However, from a visitor perspective, most visitors do not stay in one town for their break. So therefore, in theory, you would be asking visitors to download different apps when they moved into different places. So there is a logic around the scale side of things. I know that Angus, for example, are at the moment developing an app for Angus, and they've used some of the funding that has come through some of the town's programs to provide funding. So that funding has gone into the development of an app for Angus, which might try and play a bit more of that role. So from a visitor perspective, I think the simpler the better.
Brilliant, thanks very much. And finally, Debbie, if you'd like to say if you think apps
we already have the St Andrews app, which we developed as part of our membership last year, and it works. It would do this, the stuff you're talking about. If necessary, we actually adapted some app software from Crichton Apps to do the hospitality apps. I mean, I think that our bid has done a hunger app or something for St Andrews, which is sort of an online inventory app, which is, I'm not sure how well it's being used. It's not something that recommended to my visitors because it doesn't have many businesses on it. So I do think that a plethora of apps is not a good idea, but a very simple, informative app which could apply to both visitors and locals, such as our St Andrews app, which is almost a listing app, but it does have buses and all the rest of it, and some accessible information, which is incredibly important for our locals and our visitors. So maybe have a look at that and use something that's relatively inexpensive.
Thanks very much. It seems that apps are the future for those who can afford it. But I have a question from Sandra Ben, a final question, particularly for Danielle. Sandra represents Musselburgh Business Group, and with little or no funding, she asks, what can Danielle suggest we prioritise for encouraging more local support to our centres, to our town centres from our community? So with no funding available for Musselburgh, Danielle, what can you conjure up as a suggestion for Sandra Ben?
Well, I'd be happy to take a call with you to discuss some of the measures that we are put in place, or even some things that, I've been on a little bit of a tour recently, even of some of the bids south of the border, to find out what initiatives they're putting in place and how they're encouraging footfall to their high streets. Some of them are not costly, even just, if there's very minimal funds there. What we found is having, a similar branding, focusing back on the branding, such as independent Stirling or, independent shopping experience, and how you can advertise almost, a trail of those and encourage people to, to shop local, even advertising the Scotland Loves Local campaign in as many premises as possible. I can only imagine will educate and encourage those in the local area, to take, really have that at the forefront of their mind and consider local before Amazon.
Right. Thanks very much. And the final question is to Phil, because I think he might have something to say about the town centre review. Phil.
Thanks, John. Yep, a lot of what we've discussed today has been very much focused around the resilience phase, recovery phase, but I think it's really important that we don't take our eye off the long-term picture. So there's just a few points. Behind the scenes, there's an ongoing retail strategy, because I think sometimes we we always jump to the conclusion that town centre future isn't about retail. Retail will always play a particular role in town centres, and it's also a massive employer and supply chain employer. We have to look at a better retail strategy that's fit for the 21st century. But fundamentally, Professor Lee Sparks, who's the chairman of Scotland's Towns Partnership, is chairing a Scottish Government review. Our towns policy is already seen as international best practice. So now this is trying to take it forward to a new level, thinking about net zero, thinking about our changing demographic, about repopulating town centres, about coring up public services, etc. So there's a massive opportunity to come out with international best practice. The Towns Review will publish around November, December this year. For those of you that have looked at Programme for Government, there's also an evolving concept around the 20-minute neighbourhood. Again, a lot of the Programme for Government investment will actually be attracted using that mechanism, which is applicable to town centres, to high streets, to city centres, so everybody can live, work, play, enjoy within a sort of 20-minute journey time. So I would just to let you know that there is much more strategic and long-term thinking going on behind the scenes in terms of coming up with a post-COVID response. And I think Scotland has got a really good opportunity to lift all these things, to actually create a better economy, to create a more resilient economy if we get this right. So I'm looking at this very positively, I have to say.
Brilliant, Phil. Thanks very much. We're really pretty well out of time now. I would just like to thank our speakers today, Phil Prentice, Daniel McCrory-Smith, Caroline Warburton and Debbie McCallum. I think they've all been absolutely brilliant and immensely stimulating, and without doubt that is shown by the chat box, which I've never seen a chat box so full of communication and interaction. And I think that is a tribute in itself to the quality of the speakers and the stimulation they provided to, at one point I saw there were 119 people with us today. So I would like to thank you all for attending, those of you who are still with us. I appreciate we've gone a bit over time. Again, I'd like to thank our speakers. And I would just say that the chat box, as it is, Alison and others has texted me to say that they will pick up, they'll save the chat box and pick up on any questions that have not been answered and any work that arises from the huge amount of stuff that's in the chat box. So I hope everyone's happy with that. But if you have any further questions subsequently, of course, don't hesitate to get in touch with the Scotland's Towns Partnership. So I've now moved to the final item in the agenda, wondering if there's any other competent business, and if there is, anyone who has anything to say, please speak now. And since no one has, I just draw the meeting to a close. And thank you all for attending, and no longer I need to wish you a safe journey home, but nonetheless, thanks for attending, and we look forward to seeing you on the next meeting. Thank you. Goodbye.